Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the members and anybody from the general public that's joined us this evening. Welcome to December's executive. Welcome to winter, everybody, although we've had our first blast of it. Hopefully you've survived it and will survive all the sniffles that follow. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please, Rachel. Sorry, Miss Willis.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Helen Whitcroft has sent apologies, but she may be joining virtually.
Very good. And I think Councillor Lee gives his apologies for potentially arriving a little bit late. Anything else? No? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments on the minutes for anybody? I'm good to sign? Excellent. Yes. Thank you. I shall hold that in abeyance. Thank you. Declarations of interest with respect to tonight's agenda. Anybody?
No, Chair.
No? Okay. I think I have a non-peculiar interest for the Briars Centre Management Committee, though it has never met since I've taken up the role. I have seen no documentation associated with the role, and we're not too clear on what the constitution of the body is. But apart from that, I think I'm technically on it. Yeah. Public question time. Don't think we had any questions from the public, did we, that we're aware of?
No, Chair, we didn't have any.
No? Okay. That's good pace so far. Opening up for questions by members, agenda item number 5. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you. On the 3rd of October, the footbridge connecting Bagshot and Lightwater was closed by National Highways, and they're going to be demolishing it, all being going to plan this weekend. Brought this up at the last executive. I was wondering if there'd been any progress since then on mitigating some of the effects on Bagshot residents, such as has there been progress on the refurbishment of the Whitmore Road play park? There's a legal issue between the council and Surrey County Council. I understand it's been escalated. I wonder if there's been any progress on that or anything else to do with the closure of the footbridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. If none of the executive have got anything to add on that, no, then probably it comes back to myself. So my understanding from relevant officers involved on the legal side is that we have had a constructive meeting, which I think was on the 27th of November from memory, with Surrey County Council, but that's not to say it's a done deal yet. And both parties are obviously aware of the importance of this matter to the families and potentially the young people of Bagshot. So we'll look to keep progressing that. That was on the Whitmore Road one, yeah. I'm pleased to say that I think on the Albert Road one, there's a lot of parks in Bagshot. On the Albert Road one, the progress is more positive, where I think the plan is to go out to tender shortly. Imminently even, and follow that up with a consultation, which I think will run over into the new year, if I've followed latest developments, which is good news, and hopefully with the support from the selected supplier in due course, we can get something in place for when the weather gets better and for the young people to enjoy. Yeah, which I think is to the benefit of everybody in the area. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other questions? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the external partnerships meeting last week due to illness, but I have sat and listened to the whole meeting. I noted at the beginning of the meeting we discussed for a short period of time the revenue grants, and I know you asked a question of the 151 officer that wasn't present about the, I think you worded it, the uncaring Conservatives and the fact that we weren't funding citizens' advice to the level at which you think it should have been done. As one of the uncaring Conservatives that was on the executive at the time, I think it's fair to say that the portfolio holder that most people in this chamber know is probably the least uncaring person that was in the chamber at the time. And to suggest that we don't care about the revenue grants and the organisations that are there, I think is disingenuous. I think most people in this chamber know that Sarah Jane was a very caring person, and I had numbers of conversations with the officers and the rest of the executive and Sarah Jane about what we could do to support the relevant organisations. So I don't particularly like the way that was commented. And as one of the only members of the executive from the previous administration left, the fact that you're calling the fact that we weren't caring, we funded, I believe, last year £186,000. This year you're funding £180,000, of which you are giving more to Citizens' Advice, but you're not funding the Blackwater Valley and Basingstoke Canal, and you reduced the time to talk money as well. And as an uncaring Conservative,
For a question, Councillor.
there will be there will be one falling very, very soon. As an uncaring Conservative, I recently supported the Citizens' Advice with their quiz, which I hosted on their behalf. We had a full team of Conservatives, uncaring Conservatives at that meeting, of which there wasn't any sign of any Lib Dem. So my question to you is, if you are so caring, why are you spending £160,000 of your money on bins rather than paying more money to the revenue grants? Thank you.
The Levelling Up Fund has specific categories which can be funded. We wished to make a transformation and respond to the feedback in the survey that was done a couple of years ago in terms of the priorities for residents in the borough. And therefore, we have selected a number of projects of which I think we'll be touching on later this evening. There was so many meetings coming together, it's difficult to keep track, but yes, this evening. In terms of some of the other points you raised, the facts are that you, as the Conservative group and administration, did take those items out of the base budget and have left us to now try and find a way to fund them. So it was so important to the Conservative group that you took it out of the base budget, and therefore we will now have to address that item. It's also fair to say that nothing is decided until it's decided. And as you're well aware of the governance processes, that has not yet come to the executive for a decision. So we will look at that in due course and decide the way forward. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Hoad.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. This is the first time I've spoken in a council meeting, so I'm not wasting the opportunity. I'm going to cut to the chase with what I think we probably all agree is a pretty meaty topic. Obviously, I'm not a member of the exec. I'm aware, as a backbencher, that the exec, are in the throes of putting together the 24-25 budget. I know it's not ready yet, but I'm wondering if you're able to give us some insight, at least in a top level thing, in three areas. One is, are there any income things on the income side which are significantly different from anticipated? I know everything will change. Two, are there any things on the cost side which are significantly different? And three, and I perhaps should know this but don't, can you give us a timeline on when we, the bulk of the councillors, can expect to see something on paper on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoad. Yeah, it's indeed a busy time for the council staff, particularly in finance and service lead roles, as we prepare for the 2024-25 annual plan and medium-term financial strategy. My thanks to all involved for the constructive engagement in aiming to get to a sustainable budget, despite the challenging economic environment due to our MPs' national government policies fueling inflation and interest rates. as well as the fantasy financials inherited locally from the Cavalier Conservatives in the previous administration. As per normal process, we will bring the budget through to full council in February after review by Performance and Finance and the Executive in advance. Some other enabling activities have already been progressed via the Employment Committee, Joint Staff Consultation Group and external partnerships, as well as potentially tonight. In my much misrepresented statement to residents in mid-September, I stated that the inherited medium-term financial strategy saw general fund reserves reduced to zero within 3.5 years, approximately zero within 3.5 years. And given various headwinds, this could be as near as 2 years. Noting values drilled into me at school and at home and at church, I didn't lie then and I haven't lied since. The case for the prosecution for decades of financial mismanagement and cosy relationships between parish, county, MP and borough councillors is becoming increasingly clear to this administration. Last year's medium financial term strategy saw a gap between income and expenditure of 3.8 million envisaged for this year to be plugged from reserves by taking out additional debt as cash. A recent estimate from the finance team saw this gap increase by 45%, despite elements of the efforts of the officer team to close it and direction from the current administration that it was a top priority to be closed. So what are the main variances seen so far? Our main contracts, for example, for the bins and green spaces, are all index linked to inflation, which is way above that assumed last year and approaching double digits in percentage terms. This is a major hit to the budget. We value our staff and we want to pay them fairly and for them to avoid hardship, which will cost an extra $225,000 next year, given the earlier 2% assumption. As we uncovered recently, we have inherited a 30 million error in the minimum funding requirements related partly to the purchase of the Square and House of Fraser, which is losing value at an average of 10 million a year or £111 per resident per year. This unwanted early Christmas present equates to an extra £310,000 per year that we will need to find. On the income side, the picture is also unhelpful, with council tax receipts planned down 383,000, mainly due to inherited house growth being 0.34% versus a 1% assumed in February this year. Our MP and responsible Minister for Local Government, Michael Gove, continues to raid Surrey Heath's business rates like some modern-day robber baron, allowing us to keep just 8.1% of the 37 million planned to be raised next year, which also leads to a 242k negative variance than previously forecast. Lastly, and I must admit, this one does make my blood boil, but also shows the true colours to shine through of the Conservatives. Not just grubby or nasty or untrustworthy, but mean to those most in need of our help in Surrey Heath's communities. Failure to budget fairly sees this administration having to fill an £80,000 a year gap for the citizens' advice of Surrey Heath to keep its ability to support the 45% more clients than previously during a cost of living crisis winter of Gove's Conservatives' making. So today, we remain deep in the budget process, guided by the Section 151 officer and with the full engagement of the senior officer team to try and navigate a way through many tough decisions to a sustainable budget whilst avoiding further surprises. Thank you, Councillor Hope, for your question. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. On a slightly related subject. The previous administration left the council with 4 years of unaudited accounts. Many councils have some unaudited accounts, but this council seems to be in a worse position than nearly all others in England. Has there been any progress since the last audit of standards? The auditing of the accounts for 2019 and to 2020. I think there was hope to be progress by now. Just wondering if there's been any. Thank you.
I'm not aware of any progress to date. I think the protocol in this section is not to refer it through to the officers. Is that correct? And Councillor McIntyre has also signalled that she's not aware of any progress either. So I think the situation that you've alluded to remains. I believe there's an Audit and Standards Committee coming up, is it next week from memory? And we look forward to Councillor Betton holding various groups to account to try and see if we can make some progress. Thank you for your question,
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. Sorry, I'm terribly sorry, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Leader. I have two questions. And I look forward to an answer to both. I'll read them both out if I may, to give you a little bit of time to respond. The current administration has chosen not to support a civic service for the mayor in this term. Could they please explain why, when it's an opportunity to increase and embrace the differences within the borough, that they are not prepared to continue to support an event which promotes cohesive relationship between our residents? My second question is, I have over the last 7 months sat through more political muck throwing than I have experienced during the previous 8 years. Would the leader of the council join me in criticising the previous Lib Dem administration in not taking the opportunity a little over 4 years ago to join the community group in forming a cross-party administration, which may have avoided the current situation? And do they, like me, feel that it is more constructive to stop wasting officer and councillor time and move on beyond what some may see as pre-election pontification and spend the time more wisely with trying to improve the lives of Surrey Heath residents by stopping the political mudslinging? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think you've had a response to us, as have other parties, concerning your first question, but I'm quite happy that we go through the loop again in 5 working days. With respect to your second question, I wasn't here. I don't have a time machine, so I can't possibly comment on the reasons why things were not done in the first part of your second question. With respect to your second part of your second question, I would say that we are having to look into some severe headwinds, and it is important that people are held accountable for these, whether they be Michael Gove's policies as the responsible minister for local government, or his policies for turbocharging inflation and high interest rates that are affecting our residents, or the local administration, the previous local administration that made decisions that have left us with crippling debts. So I don't count that as mudslinging, I count that as responsible leadership. Thank you for your question.
If I could just come back on the first point, although you've shared...
I'm sorry, Councillor Wheeler, we've moved on, thank you.
Our residents haven't heard a reason as to why.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'm sorry, it's Councillor Thorne, but you've got your Councillor Cope badge in front of you, so have you had a transformation there?
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah.
Having spoken to a number of colleagues from across the chamber, I was amazed to hear that the unofficial statement released by the Leader back in September is not actually as widely supported as things might seem, including by members of his own party and even executive. With that in mind, and given that one of your members of the executive is performance and finance portfolio holder, and I believe an accountant that works for a large international banking group, I'd be interested if the Leader could confirm if Councillor McIntyre openly supports the Leader's opinion that the council is going to go bankrupt, or if she does not? A simple yes or no would suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. I can speak for myself. I do support the Leader's statement.
Councillor Lee, I do hope this question is not going to be as tricky as the ones you were asked Thames Water in this chamber recently.
Thank you, Leader. I'm afraid I'm going to have to be Gavin Chinnan because I'm not probably sat at the right desk, but my apologies to Gavin. So, Leader, last week a prominent local Conservative parish councillor with very close ties to Michael Gove stated on Facebook that the public should ignore warnings about the state of the Borough Council's finances because Surrey Heath Borough Council have, and I quote, 42 million in the cupboard, funds put aside to cover the costs. Can the Leader confirm whether he's been given keys to that cupboard, what he found when he peered inside? Or can I put it to him that this is in fact a grotesque misunderstanding or misrepresentation of the state of our financial position and a profound, perhaps willful misrepresentation of the nature of reserves?
I haven't seen the cupboard with the cash in it. No, unfortunately not, although there are some big cupboards up there, so maybe I'll go looking later. I think it would be best, given that I have got myself into some moderately tepid water in the past, by making comments that are my opinions rather than the Section 151's officer's facts, that we get the Section 151 officer to support me in answering this question within 5 working days. Thanks for your question. I think we are up on time. I am conscious that Councillor Wheeler probably got in first, although she put her hand down. Did you have a third question, Councillor Wheeler, or not?
No.
No. Okay. In that case, I'll take one more, which I think was Councillor Wilson. Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick question, and relating to what you said about items missing from the budget. If the Conservatives administration was not uncaring, why did they remove all the revenue grants from the medium-term financial strategy? Was it, do you think, to make sure that the reserves didn't run out earlier? The revenue grants fund things like, as you said, Citizens Advice, but it also funds the Hope Hub and many other services that are a vital safety net for people in our borough, especially in a cost of living crisis. So if it wasn't because they were uncaring, was it because they were manipulating the figures to make it look like the council's finances would last for 4 years? Thank you.
Again, I wasn't here, I don't know. What I can say is a couple of things. So, first of all, credit where credit is due. The Hope Hub was ring-fenced and protected for a number of years going forward, and I think everybody in the chamber understands that decision and fully supports it. So my thanks to the Conservative group for doing that on behalf of those that are positively impacted by that great work. In terms of your wider point, I think we have seen a number of items which have been surprises. And that says to me a pattern of behaviour. So, for example, there have been a number of discussions in this chamber concerning the fact that the investments in the mall and the square and the House of Fraser, etc., were done for regeneration. Regeneration would imply money is required to do that work. We know that the money was not put in for future work that we will have to do. And whilst I am not, for commercial reasons, allowed to talk numbers there, we are talking multi-millions will be required to stop the buckets. The only people that have done well by pushing the can down the road here is Roberts Dias, because they've run out of buckets for all the holes in the ceilings. So we will have to address that, but in terms of prudent planning, that was not put into the medium-term financial strategy, because that also would have had a negative impact on the overall position of the reserves. Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson. Okay, so in the interest of time, I suggest we move on. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and the discussion. We move on to something probably a little bit drier for the average member of the public. Item 6, which is the calculation and setting of the council tax base for 2024-25. Not that the council tax in any way is dry or given the impact it has on people's pockets, but this particular paper deals with some of the technicalities of how we go about that. So I think this is probably Councillor McIntyre to take the lead on. So, okay?
It is indeed. Thank you, Leader. I'm glad you quantified that it wasn't dull. I thought you might be talking about my presentation of it. Right, so this paper has come here today to approve the council tax base for 2024-25, which we need to have done by the 31st of Jan 24. The tax base for the year is being calculated at just short of an additional 40,000, with a growth of 136 properties on the prior year. The main rationale is that last year's anticipated growth hasn't come through in the way expected, and therefore this year it is anticipated to be slightly lower, and that's obviously all linked to what we know about in terms of planning and and what properties we know are going to come up in the borough. We're awaiting government guidance for future changes, which will come through with effect from the 2025-26 year. And the local council tax support service that we offer to those that need it has meant that the Borough Council has foregone approximately £360,000. Any questions?
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I don't think it was dry at all. I enjoyed reading it. I've got 3 small questions. I'll reference the paragraphs and ask them all at once, if that's all right. Page 4, paragraph 1.3. There's only 145 new Band D property equivalents predicted for next year. I think that seems quite low to me. What about Mindenhurst? And just looking at the housing needs assessment, it requires 225 new affordable properties every year, just affordable properties. So I'm surprised that number isn't higher. Page 6, paragraph 1.17.
Councillor Wilson, should we deal with them one at a time? It might just be easier for those, otherwise we'd be jumping across pages. Is that okay with yourself?
Of course, yep.
Who's picking the first one up?
Me.
Thank you.
So it's a really good point, and I think it does look a little bit odd when you know the volume of properties that we know still need to be built. But it's a combination of properties that weren't built last year, the MOD properties that will be demolished, so which will go, and obviously a number of the projects that are in flight aren't necessarily going to be delivered in accordance with their original timescales. So the numbers that are in there seem to be a prudent reflection.
Thanks, understood. Would you like me to go ahead?
Keep
with the
going,
second
please.
one?
Thank you.
Okay. A small question. Page 6, paragraph 1.17 on the local council tax support scheme. I was just wondering, is there a significant underclaiming of that, so we can expect it potentially to go up if there's a recession? Thank you.
It's a good point. We believe that the caseload is similar. So this 31st of March 23 is 2,291, and the current caseload is at just over 2,300, so it's similar.
Final point is on page 9, paragraph 6.4. Is there any estimate on how many of the empty properties would be sold? These are the properties that have been empty for 1 to 2 years that will now be subject to 100% premium. Will we actually collect that premium, or is there an estimate how many of them will be sold instead? Thank you.
So the finance team have excluded the properties that we know have been sold, so we won't be collecting on the empty premium, and that's just short of it's about 88 properties. However, it's a little bit like, it's a bit of a stab in the dark, isn't it, to know exactly what the intentions are by homeowners. But what's known about is included.
Any other questions? Councillor Quinn, please. Thank you.
So I also enjoyed reading the report. So looking at page 6, 1.10, I only have a small question. We're clearly talking about properties that are subject to the empty homes premium. I was just wondering for completeness, do we also have the number for derelict housing properties that won't pay any council tax because they're not technically habitable anymore?
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I don't have that number to hand, so I'll come back to you on that one.
Councillor Weeder, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Zoom. Within the report, you say that residents will be encouraged to claim the help that is due to them. Could I please have a description of how we will do that? And we have a target of collecting 98.5% of the taxes due. Could I please know what we currently collect and whether or not we are looking to improve on the percentages that we currently collect or maintain?
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Unfortunately, I didn't get the first question, so I'll answer the first question again, if that's okay. So in terms of your second question, I will need to go back and get the exact figure, but we are one of the best boroughs in the UK for collecting our council tax, which is something that our Section 151 officer is very proud of. And I believe it's 98 point. I'm not going to quote figures because I will get them wrong, but I know that the target in there is very manageable.
Sorry, that doesn't answer the first question. Are we looking to improve on what we currently collect, or are we looking to maintain it? So I don't think we know that. We're looking to collect 98.5%, but is that just maintaining what we're currently doing, or are we looking to improve on what we're currently?
So, I mean,
what we're currently doing.
With any process, you look to improve it all the time, don't you? But at 98.5%, we are doing extremely well. And so
Come back to me within 5 days. And then my other question was that we are saying any benefits that are, or any breaks that are due to them. Could you please explain to me how we are looking to encourage? So what steps are we taking? What are we doing to encourage and support those residents that are due support? It's a very sort of open-ended statement in the paper. Thank you.
thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. Let me come back to you on the steps that are taken specifically in relation to that. I think Mr. Watson looks like he wants to say something, but I'm hesitant to pass over.
Please, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Wheeler. Just to say, the collection rate target is that nobody will ever collect 100%. There's obviously people that aren't able to pay, and we tend to pursue the people that won't pay rather than those that can't pay. In previous years, we've had a target of 99%, which we've hit. Obviously recognising that potentially there is a cost of living crisis out there, and people may choose other priorities than council tax payment. We expect our collection rate to be slightly down. We are still in the top 10% of collection authorities for council tax, and in the top 1% for business rates across the country, and we hope to maintain that going forward. Obviously, we will push where we can to improve it. In terms of helping people when they are unable to pay, we encourage them to contact us and discuss with us as a service team, and we will work out ways where we can help people either set up payment plans where they need to pay us, but we'll also direct them to areas where they are entitled to get support from either the council or from other government bodies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. So the statement about encouraging people to claim relief is one which is reactive to somebody that is in difficulty, rather than looking to proactively help people by sharing that information, is my takeaway from that. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
I think we'd look to support anybody in need, Councillor Wheeler, to make sure they access the benefits they're entitled to. I think, and relief from council tax is one of those. So yeah, we'd very much support that. Just maybe it was just me requiring a hearing test, but I couldn't really get the bit that we're supposed to respond to you within 5 working days on. Could you just repeat that?
Mr. Watson has answered that question. Thank you,
Has he?
Leader.
Excellent, good. Sorry for my my issue at my end. Sorry?
Very low volume.
No, I know it was. I'm just being a bit
Not being able to
self-deprecating as
enunciate
always.
is not something I'm normally accused of, but thank you.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. I just didn't want you to miss out on any exciting feedback. Okay, so any other questions? I've probably just got one clarification, if that's okay, which is I noticed under the recommendation it mentions the disregard of 100% of the war and disablement pensions and war widows pensions in the calculation of income with effect from the 1st of April 2024. I thought in a previous draft I had seen something in the body of the report on that, but then when I reread it twice I couldn't find anything. Is that related to the work that was done with respect to securing our Armed Forces Covenant and also supporting the Royal British Legion's campaign to ensure that those in the armed forces are treated appropriately?
Leader, thank you for that question. It's part of the Credit Their Service campaign led by the Royal British Legion nationally, and the amendments to the local government support scheme does reflect what they have been seeking.
Great.
Leader, while I have the microphone, I've noticed a small discrepancy between the recommendation, the first set of recommendations at Roman numeral 3 and the recommendations to full council at Roman numeral 3. The first one says there's no change, and then the second one says the change to the war pensions and war disablement pension. So I suggest either we delete the first recommendation, or we say at the end of the first recommendation 3, other than as set out in the further recommendation 3 below.
And what would be your preference?
I think technically it would be better to add the reference to the changes in the second set of recommendations to full council. So you would add in.
Okay, if the executive could bear that in mind when we come to a moment of decision in a second. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question with regards to the downgrading from the 1% to the 0.34% of the council tax rate. Was that because in the previous strategy, the previous report that would have come to this point last year, your predecessor didn't properly put in the right figures? Was it a failure to properly scrutinise the figures that were presented, or was it just an unfortunate reality?
Thank you, Councillor Rise. I don't think I can comment on something that happened a year ago. As we know, the council tax base is based on new homes that we are anticipating to be built within that year and future years. Unfortunately, last year there was what went in was clearly overstated from what happened in reality.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. And thank you, Mr. Roberts, for and I think Mr. Ramtahel for picking up as well, for the correction to the recommendations. Maybe just to loop back on the Armed Forces Covenant thing. As these policies come up for renewal, we will continue to look to embrace those objectives, both for the Armed Forces Covenant and the Royal British Legion's desire that we treat our Armed Forces veterans appropriately. So that's maybe just a note for comment. Good. Any? No. Okay. So, keeping in mind the amendment of that Mr. Roberts suggested, the executive is advised to resolve that the calculations of the tax base in annexes A to F summarised below be noted. Point 2, in accordance with the local authority's calculation of tax base England Regulations 2012, the amount calculated by Surrey Heath Borough Council tax as its tax base for the year 2024-25 shall be 39,749.5, Band D equivalent properties, and no changes be made to the current local council tax support scheme, except as required to incorporate any regulations laid down by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, taking on board the amendment as advised by Mr. Roberts. And the executive is advised to recommend to full council that, with effect from the 1st of April 2024, the empty homes premium be set at the maximum levels allowed in legislation where the property has been empty for 1, 5 or 10 or more years, as detailed in paragraph 1.8, that the council tax exceptional hardship policy remains unchanged for 2024-25 and the fund available will be set at 30,000, and the local council tax support scheme be amended to disregard 100% of the war disablement pensions and war widows pensions in the calculation of income with effect from 1st of April 2024. Are we so agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I'm hoping for a shorter recommendation coming up. Right, so let's move on to the item 7, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund Year 3 project, which I think is with yourself.
It is. Evening, colleagues. Surrey Heath Borough Council was awarded £1 million from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Approximately £880,000 of the fund is allocated to the final 3 years, which is 2024 to 2025. A report was submitted to Executive in September 2023 to agree the themes of the Year 3 project spend. The purpose of this paper is to seek approval from the Executive for the projects that will be delivered in Year 3. The proposed projects are as follows. Litter bin replacement programme, delivery of 3 upgraded parks, including Burrell Road, Mitchett Recreation Ground and the Briars Centre, in particular new playground equipment within those parks. Camberley Town Centre public realm enhancements, which is likely to include things such as upgrading the passageway at Arnold Walk between B&M and the Main Square car park, CCTV improvements and upgrades, and repairs to the seating along Park Street. The SME Decarbonisation Loan Scheme, formerly known as LowCase, which was previously agreed at the Executive in March 2023. This scheme enables SMEs to access green loans in order to reduce their carbon footprint. Officers have been working alongside the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities and the Surrey Heath Partnership to agree funding based on these themes and to make sure they meet the fund criteria. For information, the Surrey Heath Partnership is the local partnership group which is also required to agree the projects as part of the funding conditions. As this is a government grant, we are also required to process this through the budget setting process which is currently being conducted. It is recommended to the Executive to agree the proposed projects and the associated budgets which are outlined in Annex 1. Any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, can you just clarify, your hand was raised either very early for this item or right at the back end of last item? I'm not sure which. Can you?
I'd like to be ahead of the curve, Leader. It's for this item.
I'm sorry, could you say again?
This one.
For this item, okay. Yes, I know you've never been accused of being quiet, but yes, today's the first. Yeah. Sorry for the technology glitches, Councillor Wheeler. Challenges. I think we give way to you as you had your hand first. So yeah, Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of points to raise. Delighted to hear that we're having new bins. Whether or not that's where I choose to spend the money or not is not my decision. However, we did raise in September the need for bins that were sympathetic to conservation areas, and I don't see that clarification in this paper. And I also believe that the portfolio holder said that they would contact parishes to talk through that with them, and I wondered whether or not that had happened. I also notice the provision of bins appears to appear twice. Once with the redevelopment of Camberley Town Centre and the money that is going into the public realm there, and once obviously in the whole bin replacement programme. The other thing that I'd just like to seek some reassurance on is I have 3 emails in my inbox in the last couple of days that relate to the emptying of bins, particularly in relation to the SANGs that we are responsible for in Chobham. So I just want to make sure that before we invest in these shiny new bins, we are absolutely confident that we've got the service right to empty them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
Councillor Wheeler, when this came to executive in September, you were assured by the officers that the bins in your area would be sympathetic and in keeping with the aesthetics of the area, so that has already been guaranteed to you. Where are you seeing this appearing twice?
It's not reflected in the bin types that are in that report.
I'm going to hand this over to Councillor Rise to answer that for you.
Councillor Wheeler, as was stated within the report, there is provision for heritage bins, and that assurance was given to you by Mrs McCubbin at the time of the report. So that provision is there. Just because there aren't pictures of what that heritage bin will look like in the report doesn't mean they're not going to be provided. Just also in terms with regards to the point about consultation, this is a longer term project which is not happening immediately, and that was made clear within the original report and is being made clear here, and there will be consultation at the time of when this project comes forward. So the consultation hasn't happened now, but it will be. I gave that assurance in executive. I gave that assurance directly to you, Councillor Wheeler. So maybe if councillors were to wait to be contacted, that would be worthwhile.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. I think there was another question there raised there around consultation with the parishes. Did I pick that up correctly?
Yeah,
Wheeler?
that's fine, and that's okay. I'm quite happy to accept Councillor Rise's assurance. I did receive them before. I just couldn't see them listed on the bin type that I have in the report in front of me. So I'm sure that he will understand my requirement to try and get this right. The other point related to, and I just wanted to be assured that there wasn't a degree of double counting, which related to the funds that relate to the Camberley Town Centre public realm enhancements, which also talks there against, again, I'm just looking for the right page rather than my notes, but it talks again there about improved bins. It's bins and something else that I've got written down. I can't find the exact page now. So it's just really looking for assurance that we weren't at risk of double counting the cost of our bin replacements.
Yeah, I think we're happy to give that reassurance that we're not double counting. In terms of the public amenity improvements, that's with a view to improving the safety and the attractiveness of that particular area, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wilson, I think you were next.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I think these projects will be really welcomed by all of our residents. It's going to make a big difference. However, page 20, paragraph 1.5, looks like the projects could be delayed due to the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities having digital issues. Can you expand on what that is? Has the Secretary of State locked himself out of his emails?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to have to refer that over to Mr Breeden with regards to the digital issues, and I'm not aware of the exact nature of those.
Yeah, there was some issue with the reconciliation from previous years, at the department's end of it. So I think that's what that relates to. But I don't think that should have a material impact on the deliverability of any of these projects.
Councillor Quinn, please. Yeah.
So sorry to go back to bins, but I spoke to Accent about their old wooden bins on the Avenue Sucy, Southway and Surrey Avenue estate a little while ago. And they seemed very keen to potentially benefit from the scale of our bins project. And I believe they even asked Surrey Heath for a quote to replace their old wooden bins with new Glasgow Plaza bins along with our project. Can I just ask whether any more progress has been made to work with Accent in this regard?
Councillor Rise, do you?
I can't give any assurances. I've not been informed, but I will go to officers and get a response for you within the usual 5 days.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. I think Councillor Garrett was next.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to talk about bins, except that on my way to be Santa Claus on Saturday, 2 bins on the Old Dean Rec were overflowing. I don't know if it was the wrong day, but I obviously want to make sure that I didn't get a chance to report them, so I will look and see if they're still overflowing. That wasn't my question. My question was really related to the projects and what was previously were the 3-year projects. There were a number of things on there previously, and I just want to sort of just touch base on those. One of them was, I believe, for funding £100,000 for the hub, I think it was, which obviously is the workshop, which I think we can probably all agree is doing a really good job. And I think the funding finishes in April. So that isn't there now. Does that mean that we won't be funding it, or is there other money that's going to be found for that? I also remember there being things like funding for captioning of shows at the theatre, which obviously helps support the deaf community. I remember that being on there. There was something to support the museum. I think it was about £10,000 to support the museum. And a few other, I think there was about, I won't quote figures, but something to support the obesity project. So I know they're not on there now. Is that something that is still going to happen, or are they not going to be done now at all? I've got, obviously, the projects apart from the bins, I have no issues with, but Joe, I'd just like some feedback on those sort of projects that were there previously.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Garrett. With regards to some of those projects, we will be seeking alternative funding streams for those. We have prioritised long-term capital items, and we believe that these items are going to give the most residents the most benefit for their money.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased that the current administration is looking to support E1 and E3 of that particular funding. However, I'm very concerned that we don't seem to have utilised any of this money for an area which is certainly at high risk and of high priority for the residents of Windlesham, Chobham and West End as well, I believe, which is the funding for new or improvements in existing neighbourhood infrastructure that give resilience to natural hazards such as flooding. And I just wondered if it would be possible to have some reasoning behind that and an understanding as to why that isn't being prioritised when it is something which is certainly a high priority to the residents that I represent.
Councillor Fine-Cook.
That wouldn't be the responsibility of the Borough Council to worry about that flooding there. And also projects such as that wouldn't meet the funding criteria for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Councillor Wheeler.
With respect, E2 funding for new improvements to existing community neighbourhood infrastructure projects that increase communities' resilience to natural hazards such as flooding. And actually, again, with respect, it is the responsibility of the Borough Council because we're responsible for land which forms part of our flood resilience. So much as I appreciate your response, I would be grateful if maybe we could relook at that allocation and those applications.
Councillor Wheeler, whilst I appreciate your concern for your residents, we have had to look at projects which have the impact on the maximum amount of residents for allocation of monies from this fund.
Thank you. I will let my residents know that a play park is more important than their home.
I don't think that's what the councillor said, but thanks for the comment, Councillor Wheeler. The issue around the emptying of bin performance has come up a number of times. It might be something for the chair of P&F to consider. I think that would be an appropriate thing to happen because it's not just yourself that is reporting these bins overflowing. I find myself having to do the same thing. Councillor Rise, please.
Thank you. Just on that point, I just really want to re-stress to everyone that reporting overflowing bins is essential. And I just note that Councillor Garrett said he saw the bins and didn't report them. He didn't have time. I accept that. But it's important that when we as members and councillors receive complaints from members of the public about overflowing bins, that we are ensuring that they are reported. There are policies in place that if there is an overflowing bin, if it's not emptied within the correct amount of time, which I believe is 24 hours, that then there is further steps to be taken. So it needs to be reported, and again, it needs to be followed up. So please, this is a plea to all members that don't just take a complaint and say, yes, isn't it awful that the bin's overflowing? Ensure that it's being reported, because that is a measure that we're able to hold our contractors to account on. Thank you.
Good point, Councillor Rise, and I think that extends beyond the chamber to members of the public as well, because the sooner we know we have a problem, we can deal with it. So it's maybe something for the comms team to consider whether we can support the residents in reporting, accessing the reporting, so that we can make sure we get on top of these things as quickly as possible. I think it's also fair to say that part of the project in terms of the bin replacement should alleviate some of these issues through the consolidation, if I remember the previous discussion about increased capacity, etc., etc. Let's not go there again unless you've got a killer point to make, Councillor Rise. So just to note, Councillor Rise is happy to talk about bins outside this meeting with anybody that wishes to go into more detail on that. Any other points? Okay, very good, thank you. So we are asked to do what? Let's have a wee look. Right, the executive is advised to resolve that the projects that will be delivered in year 3 as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund are set out at Annex 1 to this report be agreed, and authority be delegated to the Head of Property and Economic Development in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic and income development and the relevant project portfolio holder to make any amendments to the Year 3 project programme should it be necessary, including assessing the project 3 deliverables set out in Annex 1. Are we so agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 8, Youth Council options. I think this is with Councillor Finan-Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Back at the October executive, we resolved that it would come back to this meeting to report on some progress with regard to Surrey Heath Youth Council and finding a provider to deliver the project going forward. And we've had some very positive progress with that. And we have a provider that we've had some extensive discussions with, both with officers and with some of the young people who have been involved in the project. And they are in a position to be able to deliver this project for us. They are prepared to deliver it for 39 weeks, beginning in January, term time weeks, so it would run from January to December. And the cost of that to us would be £14,000. We've identified the funding source for that already, and that's been discussed previously as well. So I'm asking you this evening to agree that we can go ahead and draw up the service level agreement with that provider. Thank you.
Any questions from anyone? Councillor Quinn.
Well, I don't think it will surprise you, Council Leader, that I'm really delighted at this news and that the Council's been able to find a provider for the Youth Council. You'll remember that I proposed a motion in July to push us into looking at opportunities to support the Youth Council after funding was withdrawn by the previous sponsor in July. At the time, I know some members thought that the wheels of local government were slow and that my motion may only be symbolic and not actually achieve success. I have to say I had my doubts too, but I have to give special thanks for the amazing work done by Councillor Lisa Finan-Cook and our officers at the Council, who have been exceptional at pursuing opportunities for the Youth Council, pursuing new funding and not giving up. Of course, long-term funding is still an issue, but I'm confident that if we successfully build the Youth Council and develop it over the next year, this additional funding can be secured and members of the Youth Council can help directly with that process. So this is not really a question, it's just a chance to say thank you for all the great work.
Thank you on behalf of those that did work. But maybe could we just confirm who the relevant officers were that this praise is due to, please?
Yeah, certainly. So it was Renee France and Sally Kipping who have been working very hard on this.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you. I echo Councillor Quinn's comments. Thank you for all the hard work you guys have done, because I was a little bit apprehensive whether it would actually happen within the time. I knew it would probably happen eventually, but within the time. My only question is, having had experience in recent years of youth services and the providers, and I don't know who we've picked, are we confident that we will not be in the same situation in the future, or as confident as we can be? I know it's a difficult one, but obviously now we've got the funding and we've got something in place, I would hate for it to fall apart again.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. It's a really important question. And I mean, it is very difficult times in terms of youth work and funding for youth work. And I'm not going to sit here and say, of course, it'll be no problem finding funding. That's just not the climate that we're in. The provider that we're going with, I can name them, they're called Learning Space. They've been involved in lots of youth voice projects across the county and actually beyond. They're very experienced. They have lots of connections with organisations that are relevant to this kind of work as well. So what I always say, I used to be a youth worker, and what I always found back in the day was that it's much easier to secure funding for a project that's functioning and running well. So I can't give you any guarantees, but I would say that I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be okay.
Very good. Any other? No. Okay. So a couple of quick things from my side. So just to reinforce, because I think the paper has a slight omission there, is that this funding will take us through to the end of the calendar year 2024. Correct?
Correct. Term time from January to December.
And I think I'm the one that's caught in a bit of a sandwich on this, but I think there is an outstanding action for us to look at the youth mayor, young mayor as well, which was contingent on this. So I'm looking at Mr. Wilson, Councillor Wilson, he's not looking at me, and yourself maybe to coordinate that and come forward with the proposal that you're happy with, that he can then take to the governance working group so that we can stitch these things together. I think it's also important that the relevant officers are happy that we're not doing anything too onerous whilst continuing to develop a love for democracy amongst our young people, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And Councillor Wilson and I have already had some preliminary, very initial conversations about it. What I would say is that it's very important that anything like this is youth-led. So my view would be that from the outset we involve the provider and young people who are taking part in the Youth Council.
Very good. Last thing from my side, and it won't be in any way a blocker to progress, is in the same way as we try and put some outcomes, KPIs for the other grant holders, it would be good to see that come back in due course as to how we would measure success for this particular activity. Is that okay?
Perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So, just to reiterate, result. Congratulations to all those involved, and we look forward to that being successfully re-established, and we look forward to hopefully additional funding coming on board for the long term to give that security. So the executive is advised to resolve that officers move forward with work to develop an agreement with the identified provider to re-establish the Surrey Heath Youth Council. Bring a progress report back to the executive at the conclusion of the 2023-24 academic year in summer 2024, including proposals regarding future funding. Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, we trot forward, and we need to say goodbye to some people. So I'll read out the recommendation regarding the exclusion of press and public. The executive is advised to resolve that under Regulation 4 of the Local Authority Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England Regulation of 2012, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the ground that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as set out below. Item 10, paragraph 3, information related to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Are we so agreed?